bit of intro on the business and kind of where we sit. And so First Financials, the business, is about close to 50 staff here. It's about 20 authorised reps. I'm an advisor, so just like the rest of you, I'm not selling courses or anything like that. I'm an advisor that went and sat the exam. I put a video up on LinkedIn a few weeks back, and it went kind of pretty far and wide, and then people have reached out and asked me questions ever since. So I'm not claiming to be anyone special. As I'm sitting here today, I don't even know if I passed the exam. So I could have to resit the exam. That my understanding is that there's an 8-week time frame from when you sit the exam to when you find out your results. So yes, I've done the exam. Have I passed? I have no idea. But I'll kind of share a bit about the studying that I did beforehand, what it looks like, what to expect on the day. It's not going to be death by PowerPoint. I've got 6 or 7 slides here that I'll run through, and then kind of just open to questions if anyone's got anything after that. So we ran a session here this morning. We have a monthly all-staff meeting. We ran a session here this morning with all of the advisors and associate advisors and other support staff, a lot of who will have to sit the exam over the duration anyway. Some of these slides I've pinched from that presentation this morning. So there's been one sitting of the exam already. There's another couple scheduled between now and the end of the year. They give you a registration window, which is up there. You'll see on the screen. The next one is kind of the second half of August. The registration window is open for. And then you pick a time essentially to sit the exam. So the exam runs over 4 or 5 days. There's a morning session, there's an afternoon session. You pick a time and kind of go along to it. There's a webinar that a few of us tuned into a couple of weeks ago. I think the FPA was hosting that one, and I think they mentioned there that there'll be another 6 sessions next year, so throughout 2020, none of which yet have had dates published. I would imagine it's every second month, I would have thought, but there's at least 2 more between now and the end of the year. Something to just be mindful of, and on the next slide, we're encouraging the guys here to sit it sooner rather than later. You can resit if you fail, but you can't you can't register to resit the exam if you've sat it in the last 3 months, something along those lines, which effectively means, say I failed this first sitting, I can't register for the next sitting that's available. I'll have to wait for the one after. So whilst you can resit it, you can't just fail one and then resit in the next sitting. It's going to take a bit of time. So we are encouraging all of the guys here to have had their first attempt by March of next year, just in case someone fails and it gives them a bit of time to resit. It's a big problem if you fail. So for existing advisors, there's all these transitional rules and you have to go and sit the exam, and you can, so long as you pass the exam for a period of time, it's business as usual before there's the extra education requirements. If you don't pass the exam by the end of the year, all of those transitional rules, just throw them in the bin. You have to start from scratch. You're back to your P plates. You have to do 1,500 or 1,600 hours worth of shadowed advising activity. Practically give up your clients to someone else whilst you go through that process for a year or 2. So it's a big deal if you don't pass the exam by the end of the year. Now there's a fair argument stacking up to say, how is 20-odd thousand advisors supposed to sit an exam before the end of next year? Should they push out the completion date? Maybe, but we can only go by the rules that we know as at the moment, and that's you've got until the end of the year. So if you don't pass it by the end of next year, it's a pretty big deal. This is a slide that we presented to the rest of the guys here this morning, encouraging them to sit it by March 2020, which gives a fair bit of time in case you need to resit. We've got 20 or so authorised reps, and so we don't want everyone out of the office on the same day sitting the exam or taking a couple of days off beforehand to study to sit the exam. So we've asked that we sit it in groups of 6 advisors at a time. So depending on what your businesses look like, take that idea, maybe not, but we're trying to break it up. So we'll have 6 sit at this next one, 6 the one after, 6 in the first sitting in 2020 whenever that becomes available, and that will be the bulk of the advisors and associates that are authorised will have sat the exam by then, and we'll have an idea of who's passed and who's failed. And as I said just a minute ago, if you leave it to the last minute and you fail, and you do the very last sitting and you fail, you're in a fair bit of trouble. You're going to have to start from scratch again. The exam itself, now look, all of this is on the FASEA website and associated things that they've already published if you go looking hard enough for it. If you're anything like me, you probably haven't looked at much until you go and register. So I didn't look at really anything until I decided to registered and then went to look to see what information was available. So it's just on $600 to sit the exam. So just on $600 cost to sit the exam. Once you've picked your time slot, there is some ability to move it around. So say you picked the first session on a Friday morning, for example, and something comes up, I think you can move it around a little bit, but it's pretty tight. The registration process, there's a bit to it. So it's the whole thing's being run by FASEA, I think is the group, the people that run NAPLAN. So you got to register through their website, you generate a username and password. It's not through the FPA, it's not through FASEA. Like you link through, you can go through the FASEA website and it links you through, but you ultimately end up on a website that's not a FASEA website to register for it. So you put in all of your basic details, you have to upload a photo. So the security on this is incredibly tight. Like I've sat truckloads of exams through school and uni and other studying since. Never before have I sat an exam where the security was as tight as what this is. So you've got to upload a photo at the point of registration.
Don't they trust you?
No, seems like they don't. So you upload a photo at the point of registration. Then a few days before you actually go to sit the exam, they'll email you what they call your ticket. You have to print it off on paper. So don't bring it on your phone, don't bring it on your iPad. You have to walk in there with a printed piece of paper. It's got all your basic details. It's printed out your photo. You front up with your driver's license, and go up to the couple of people that are there at registration. They tick you off a list, so they have a list that has your photo and your name and details. So there's photos everywhere to match it all up, and they hand you a piece of paper that has your username and password for accessing the system. Go and tell you to sit in the waiting room for a little while, and then eventually go into the room full of computers. Sit at the desk. All you're allowed to take with you when you go to sit the exam is the piece of paper that they've given you and your driver's license, just in case they want to double check who you are. So no pens, no pads, no phones, no nothing. Leave your bag at the front of the room. Put your drink bottle on the table at the front of the room. Don't bring your drink bottle to your desk. And just take your piece of paper that has a username and password on it. They give you a pen, and then that's it. If you run out of paper, you practically don't have to write anything. It's not a calculations exam. It's by and large an ethics exam. You take your piece of paper. They give you a pen, nothing else. Read out all of these instructions at the start so that everyone's getting the same message, and then kind of you log in and they step you through a few screens. There's a video that FASEA have provided which steps you through all of this. It runs for about 7 or 8 minutes. If you haven't watched it already, watch it. I didn't watch it until the day before I sat the exam, and it answered a whole lot of questions that I had before I went in there. So you take your registration ticket, print it on a piece of paper, your photo ID, they give you the username and password, take you into a room, sit you in front of a computer, and then they step you through the instructions. You're not allowed to take anything else, and they practically say if an alarm goes off in your watch, you're in big trouble. Right? So it's as I said, I've sat, and I'm sure most of you have sat plenty of exams in your time. I've never sat an exam that was as tight as this. Yeah. So it's one of those like not a function space, but assessment centres. Clifton's, that's the one. So it's just up the other end of Collins Street from here. Now they're all of them, and Brisbane, Sydney, Hobart. They're dotted around kind of capital cities at this stage. my understanding is there'll be some means for people in remote areas to log in and do it somehow next year, but at the moment it doesn't exist. You have to front up to one of the assessment centres. The one in Melbourne in Collins Street, so it's not just a tram ride down from here.
You have to leave it outside.
Oh, you just put it in your bag, make sure it's off. Like if your phone goes off, I'd hate to see what they do to you. Like the instructions that they read at the start. So yeah, you bring your kind of your bag, backpack, whatever. So everyone just bags and jackets and everything were just piled up at the front of the room. And raise your hand if you want to go and get a drink of water from your water bottle, and they'll let you up to go and have a drink.
3-hour period, can you go to the men's room?
Yeah. So they let you come. They let you come and go. They give you. Yeah. So it's a 3.5 hour. So it's a 3.5 hour window. 15 minutes of reading time, 3 hours 15 to sit the exam, and leave whenever you want. I can't remember, but I'm sure there was a time period right towards the end where they said if you're here in the last, say, 15 minutes or something, you're not allowed to leave, so you're not distracting everyone else. But so I left early. I left after 2 and a bit hours. I wasn't the first to leave. There were a couple of others that left before me, but most others were still sitting there. Whether they'd finished or not, I've got no idea. But I got to the point to say, look, it's a multiple choice exam. You're really going to go back and reread a multiple choice answer and change it. There's plenty of stuff that people have read to say if your multiple choice answer, generally your first guess is the best.
It's actually completed online, is it?
It's all online, yeah. So it's and that's the next slide. A couple of slides after. So I'll go through that, but there's on the next slide. So there's 3 areas, the bits that you'll see underlined there. So financial advice, regulatory and legal obligations, applied ethical and professional reasoning and communication, financial advice construction, and there's all of this detail is in this material that they've published. But there's you can see that there's like 16 kind of core areas that they're looking at in that ethical one there in the middle. So it's not a technical exam. It's if you go in there thinking this is an ethics exam, you're going to be on the right track. They're not asking you to calculate an age pension entitlement or what's a contribution limit or what's a deeming rate. It's got nothing to do with that. It's all to do with those 3 areas there.
Is it
when do you need
legislative based or
partly? Yeah.
do they give you scenarios where this happens, which is the best way to treat it?
Yeah. So they'll give you. So it's case study. It's a case study style exam. So there's a practice question that FASEA have released already. That's what it looks like. So there's this slab of text, half a dozen or so questions after you read that relate to that slab of text, and there'll be a mix of multiple choice. So pick A, B, C, or D. True or false. So the true or false are. So each question for the question there might be say 3 true or false questions that you answer. It's not just the one true or false. So 3 or 4 true or false questions, and then short answer. It'll say, given this scenario, what are 2 questions that you might ask, or what are 2 other things that you might want to know, and it tells you whether they're looking for 1 extra thing or they're looking for 2 points, and it's all online. So you type it in. So you kind of tick box for the true, false, or multiple choice, and then you type your answer into a box that they give you for.
So it's just like a paragraph, a short answer questions. It's not like.
No, it's not. Yeah, they're not looking for pages and pages. It'll say something along the lines of, "What are 2 questions that you would ask in this situation?" Whatever the case study might have been.
James, is the exam structured so that you know when you're moving from one section to the next, as in one grouping, or is it just flows?
No, so it just flows. So they've got. I'd encourage you all to have a look at the video that they've put up.
Yeah.
That's really useful in that there's a few screens. There's some introductory screens where it gives you some explanation on how to navigate the system. So what do the flow of questions look like? What materials are they providing? They tell you all of that beforehand.
Yeah.
But it's like you'll have this slab of text on the left-hand side, and then as you tick through the questions, the panel on the right changes over.
Yeah. Okay.
So that text is always there, and the panel on the right changes over. There's some and they got this in there in the video as well. There's some of the questions, there might then be like a hyperlink back, and it'll highlight a particular section of that case study that they're referring to make it a bit easier for you. But yeah, it's a slab of text due to a case study, maybe half a dozen questions that tick through that are in some way, shape or form related to that. And then you'll know when you move on, because the whole screen just changes to something completely different. You know, when you've moved on to the next section.
James, just while you're there, so I've been going through the CFA program, and it can be viewed as very theoretical and esoterical. I was wondering how well does this content relate to your practice? So, you know, if you wanted to, obviously it's a mandatory compliance program.
Yep.
But if you look at what you're going through and the questions and the case studies, and you go, well, actually that will help my practice. How practical can it be applied to, you know, to offering better advice to customers? I'm just curious to learn.
Look, I don't know if the intention of it is to help you provide better advice, but it's certainly things that you would be dealing with on a day-to-day basis, whether it's client scenarios, whether you're questioning, is this general advice, is it personal advice, what document do I need to issue, what are some of the ethical questions that I need to be thinking about. A lot of it's to do with the interaction between, or the overlay between, FASEA's Code of Ethics and the Corporations Act that we've had to deal with up until, well, that's been kind of the Bible up until recently. Now there's this Code of Ethics which goes over and above the Corporations Act. So there's a fair bit of kind of overlay between that. So you'll get this slab of text, and we'll say, it'll then ask some questions about whether you're complying with the Code of Ethics or not, and which section of the Code of Ethics might you have breached. Is it Section 2, is it Section 3, is it Section 5, or is it Section 7? Have they breached here? So you've got to know that stuff.
You've got to have common sense, but you've also got to know which particular act that
Yep.
applies.
So I personally thought it's common sense would get you through to say this isn't right and that's not right. Like, common sense would prevail there, but you then need to know, well, yes, it doesn't stack up from a common sense point of view, but based on the rules that we need to abide by and these different codes and things, well, which section have they actually broken? From an ethical point of view, it completely stinks. Yes, you can see that from a mile away, but what have they actually breached? What are you in trouble for? And so you've got to know that you don't necessarily, I don't know if you need to know the difference going in, but you need to know where to find the answers. Is probably the way to frame it.
So it's easy to navigate that.
Yeah. So the exam itself, so they say it'll be at least 64 multiple choice questions, and multiple choice is either A, B, C, or D, or true, false. And then at least 6 of these short answer questions, where it'll say, give me 2 examples of this, or 1 or 2 questions about that. I had more. I think I had 78 questions. This was the whole thing, because it's not there's no pass or fail. I think it's going to be standardised in some way, shape or form, the results. So it's not as if you get half of the answers right, you pass, or it's not as if you don't need to get 70% is a pass. So I think my interpretation of it is that they view that some questions are easier than others, so you might have more easy questions or less harder questions, is my thinking of it after sitting the exam. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I had more than 70. I think it was 78. Split between multiple choice and short answer, I have no idea, but yeah, so at least 64 multiple choice and at least 6 short answer, and that's what it says in the preparation material. It says you'll have at least. It doesn't say you will have 64 multiple choice. You'll have at least 64. So you could have more questions.
Do you know if everyone in the same exam had the same number of questions?
No idea. So it's all everyone in the room was terrorist. and then dividers up. You couldn't see. You couldn't see whether they had more or less questions, and if they would use the same question or not. So case study style questions, as I said, it's open book. It's open book in the sense that they provide you with materials, so you can't take stuff in. They provide you with what they think is relevant, and that picture there is just a screen grab from the very start of the video that they've put together.
So those materials are online, they're not.
So they're there. So the layout of the screen is there's a case study on the left, there's your questions on the right, up the top is a navigation bar to see how far along you are, and then there's a drop down thing there that says something like, I can't even remember exactly what it says, but something along the lines of there's the external material that's there. So you click on it and you get this drop down there. So in the
Does it have a fine picture?
it does, yeah. So they have, and again in the video they tell you how to find the find, and there's a table of contents they take you through all of that. But there's in their guide to preparing for the exam, there's all of this recommended reading. So there's recommended reading under each of those 3 different sections that are being assessed. There's recommended reading, and then there's extension reading as well. So they recommend you read all of these different things, but then not all of those are provided in the in the materials that they provide you. So just be mindful of that. Don't go in there thinking, hey, they're going to give me everything that they've recommended I read, because they don't. And you can pretty quickly work out what they do and what they don't. They've told you the recommended reading, and they've provided this list of what they're going to give you to answer some of the questions. So various things on that list I used at different points in time throughout the exam. But you can find the Corporations Act. Each of those extracts of the Corporations Act are in excess of 600 pages each. I don't know if you're really going to
click on that, then you key in the keyword that you're looking for based on the question.
So you click on that. You click on one of those. Say that where that pointer is, the first volume 5 of the Corporations Act. That pops up a PDF, and then there's like a search function in there. So you can do Control F, or there's just a search box in there, and there's a toggle button to bring up a table of contents down the left-hand side. So if you know roughly where it is, you can kind of scroll to it.
Did you spend a lot of time in that search area?
Did I? For some questions I did, yeah. Others I didn't. So some of the questions I just answered because I thought I knew the answer and moved on, and then there's others that I either left and came back to, or I went through the material there. So questions where it was asking something detailed about the code of ethics. Certainly I opened up the code of ethics. I'd read it plenty of times before sitting in the exam, but I opened it up so I made sure I had it in front of me to answer the question. So open book to the extent that they give you some materials to use. There's some links to the different things. So there's a preparation guide that they've put together. There's an exam video. There's a practice exam, and then there's this candidate information booklet which you're all given. Yeah, you can all find it on their website. There's a section on preparing for the exam. It's all there. So I guess even if you're not thinking of doing it in this next sitting, I'd suggest you go and have a look at that at the very least, and just know what's there, and then you can do an assessment as to how much time do you have to do all the reading that they're recommending between now and whenever the next exam sitting is.
James, you made a comment on LinkedIn. Someone wrote about this 1,000 pages.
Yeah.
And you made a comment, I think, where you said you don't have to read the whole.
Well, so that was more to the Corporations Act. Yeah. So the two extracts of each of those 2 points at the top. So it's Chapter 7 of the Corporations Act, Volume 4 and Volume 5. Each of those alone are in excess of 600 pages. So you've got 1,300 pages there of legislation. I suppose up to you whether you think it's valuable use of your time to read 1,300 pages of legislation or not, or know that it's there, and you can do a search if you really need to. The other recommended reading that they do is nowhere near that long. Like the Code of Ethics is 3 pages or something like that, and then there's the legislative instrument that goes with it is 4 pages, and there's some regulatory guides and things that they've recommended reading, which are a bit longer. But
that was a good question. So I'm seeing on LinkedIn and just generally that people are recommending RG 175, RG 244, 246.
Yep.
Is that kind of, because they're pulled from the Corporations Act effectively?
Yep.
Is that kind of a more targeted way, do you think, of approaching it?
There's one of them, and I can't remember which one it was, that I found really useful. It was a whole lot of examples, best interest type examples. So the advisor did this, and we thought it was in the client's best interest because of that. Or the advisor did this, and we didn't think it was in the client's best interest because of something else. So I found that really useful. I fortunately read that one the morning of sitting the exam. It was the last thing that I had, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
Because that, I guess that's kind of case study examples.
Yeah.
This is why we think it's in the best interest, and this is why, and that's kind of along the lines of what the exam looks like.
Do you feel that was kind of the flavour of the exam as well?
Absolutely, yeah. And so, I guess there's been a lot of criticism for the practice exam or practice question that's been published.
Aged care.
Yeah, so I wouldn't, I guess anyone that's asked me about it, I've said to them, don't get caught up in whether it's aged care and do you know about aged care or not. Don't worry so much about that. Just take it as the flavour and the style of the questions and what it's going to look like. That's what to take more from it. So they give you the practice exam, it's really just a practice question. I wouldn't call it a practice exam.
Yeah.
The practice question, they then give you the answers. So if you say, well, the question looks like this, and they're happy with an answer that looks like that, you kind of get the idea of what they're going to be asking, what they're looking for in terms of your response. So don't get too caught up in whether you know about aged care or not. And there's people criticising that there's a lot to do with powers of attorney and the rules differ in different states. Don't get caught up in that. It's more, what does it look like? And it'll put you on the right path.
Is that the only reference point in terms of the look and feel of the exam? Like, for other types of exams, there's providers that do test examples. They sign here for 100 questions and answers, and you get experience.
Yeah, look, so there's plenty of people out there that are running courses and happy to take your money to do my 90-day course or buy my this or buy my that. For some people, that's going to be valuable. I took the approach to say, look, worst case, I can resit the exam. If I fail, I can resit the exam. I'm just going to give this a go, doing some studying myself. If I pass, great. If I don't, well, then I might look out for some other help if I think I need it. So there's groups that have got practice exams that you can go along and do. I know from the emails I've had from BT, there's a free one. I think it's Kaplan's exam that BT, I imagine, is sponsoring or something, that you can go along and do for free. Some of the advisors here did that a little while back. BT had a practice exam on a little while back. So there are practice exams that other people are putting together that they think is probably the style of the exam. And then there are people that are offering to run courses and schedule groups and all of that kind of stuff.
I think Kaplan are coming out with a course.
A course,
one-day workshop,
Yeah.
$150.
So some people might think that they need that, and others don't. So that's up to the individual to work out. And so
on the exam itself, did you find that there was much around the FASEA standards? Like, were they interested in examining anything around what your CBD obligations are going forward, what your anything around the professional year or anything like that? Was that kind of just quarantine?
So that's all in the recommended reading.
Yeah.
So I would imagine there will be questions about that. To be honest, I can't remember if I had any questions on it, but it's all in the recommended reading. So I'm sure in some version of the exam it'll be there.
So with the multiple choices, were there many where two of the answers could have been You know, like one could
Yeah.
go away. Is it one of those, or is it clear cut?
There were a few where I was questioning it. Yeah.
That you,
Yeah.
that could
So
be-
there's some that I went through, and whether I read the question right or not, but I went through and just looked at. I think that's clearly the answer. Move on. So it took me 15 seconds to answer a question, and I moved on. But then there's some that I left and came back to, and like I might have pulled up some of those resources that they gave, and went through that and thought, you know what, I still can't work out what the answer is. I'll move on and then come back to it. But yeah, it's a
Because the system allows you to mark what you want to come back to, is that right?
yeah. There's a way. I couldn't work out how to mark it, but
Yeah.
it's clear where you haven't answered the question.
Right, okay, yeah.
And at the very least, I did the old classic, write down 56 on my piece of paper, so I know I've got to go back to question 56 before I leave. So I did that just to be sure.
Can you
Yeah.
call someone if you get stuck with anything?
Yeah, there's people roaming around
Asking questions about navigating or whatever.
yeah. So they help. There was a guy in front of me that had some trouble getting into the system in the first place. So one of the ladies came over and helped him get into the system and work your way through.
Stop the clock.
No, so they all of that's done pre-reading time. So they read out this kind of list of instructions and say everyone log in now and stop. And then it's okay, everyone now press this button, stop. Everyone now press this button, so that everyone is up to that reading time screen and ready to press go, all at the same time when they start the clock.
How about provide feedback around your results, like any questions, or is this just going to be a simple pass?
I think it's just pass or fail.
That's it.
Yep. I'm sure they'll publish like some stats on it. I would have thought, given it's the first round and people will be asking for it for sure. So to say these many people passed and these many people failed, whether they go to the detail and say, look, most people struggled with this type of question, that would be helpful, but I don't know if they'll do that. Yeah.
Were all the with the case studies, are all the questions equally weighted in terms of score, or is there one with more sub questions or so on and so forth?
Yeah, some had more questions than others,
Okay.
and some didn't have a short answer question. It's like a multiple choice is all just 1 point. So you might have had one case study and 4 multiple choice questions, and then you move on to the next kind of slab of text or a extract or whatever it was.
And with the ones with related to the legislation,
Yeah.
I'm guessing the way the answers that they want is where to find the specific legislation which applies to the situation, or what's the format that they?
It's not so much to say where do you find it. It's more what is the answer? What is the rule? So this has happened. What section have they contravened, or things to that. So not so much where do you find the answer or where to go looking for it. It's what is the answer. So
specific question.
They'll expect you to be able to. They'll either direct you to it, to a certain section, or expect you to know where to find the answer. So they'll ask a question, and then you'll need to know whether it's in the Code of Ethics or whether it's in the Corporations Act. So.
Is every answer worth 1 point?
I think all of the multiple choice were worth 1 point, and then the short answer were worth 2. So it'll say, give me what are 2 questions as a result of this, and you put 2 answers in the box. Type 2 answers into the box. Yeah.
So in the end, do everyone get their scores, or it's just a pass or fail?
Pass or fail.
Uh-huh.
Yep. So you don't know how well you did. So it's just pass or fail, and there's nothing to say how many questions you need to get right to qualify for a pass. I think the very last question on their frequently asked questions list is what do you need to pass, and there's no answer.
If you do fail, you can ask to be reassessed.
Yeah, I don't know, but from my interpretation of reading their frequently asked questions and things, that there's going to be some standardisation. Somewhere I read it's marked to a credit average. Whatever a credit average means, I have no idea. I'm sure that people but it's marked towards a credit average. So that leads me to think there's some type of standardisation. So then by default, a certain number of people need to pass and a certain number of people need to fail.
Correct.
And if you happen to have sat a sitting of an exam where everyone's an absolute gun and got 99% of the questions right, but you didn't, you might be the unlucky one that gets a fail. Maybe I'd look at it.
Questions are changing
I don't know.
frequently.
Yeah,
They've got different versions.
There'll be different versions for
There's
sure.
There's something, an article recently, that basically saying for the same week period there were different exams across the cities. So basically ASA are running a question bank that they'll just rotate through. So the same flavour,
Yeah.
but different details.
And I think that's why you'll have more or less questions. So say they've got 300 questions, and then you're randomly allocated a sample from that 300 questions. Some of them naturally are going to be easier than others, and then so they therefore give you more questions, and then in turn it has to be standardised, because it's not fair if someone had easy questions versus someone that had hard questions. But yeah. So and so whether the guy sitting next to me had the same exam as me, or if everyone in the room had just some random selection of questions from this bank, I've got no idea.
Who
No
are
idea.
the assessors? Is it computer?
Well, the computer will answer the multiple choice questions, so as soon as I pressed finish, I would have known how many of the multiple choice questions I got right or wrong.
Yeah.
I can
The
answer that.
Yeah.
There's a number of different consultants that have been engaged to answer the volumes of questions.
So humans are marking the short answer questions.
Mm.
Short answer.
So that's the slides that I had. You've asked a few questions along the way. If anyone's got anything more, by all means shoot.
How is it different from the past versions? Did this format or type of exam come about only after or during the Royal Commission?
It's multiple. There's been plenty of multiple choice and short answer exams. That's nothing new. I think this was in train well before the Royal Commission too. So,
If you had your time again,
yeah.
would you focus on any particular one of the three areas, or a couple of the three areas more so than the other?
Those regulatory guides
Yeah.
that we spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
I got through most of whichever one it was. You'll quickly see it. There's one
Because
that's
that's not part of the. It wasn't on the list.
No, it's not.
No. Yeah. Okay.
no.
Yeah.
So the regulatory guides. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm thankful that I read the one that I did.
Yeah.
One of the mornings here, in the Monday morning. So I did the very last sitting on the Monday. There would have been maybe 40 people, I think, in my sitting.
Yeah.
From someone that I was talking to, one of his colleagues did the very first sitting on the Friday morning, and there was hardly anyone there. He said there were 6 people in the waiting room to sit the exam. More people showed up, but there was only 6 people in the waiting room. So it was pretty small numbers early on.
They were very quiet about when the dates are on. I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
until I saw your post.
Yeah, look, I didn't know about it. I knew it was coming up, but I hadn't bothered to look at it until there was an FPA event on across the road at one of the hotels a few weeks back, and they were talking about it there, and I came back from that and registered. I thought I may as well give it a go.
Yeah.
So you kind of went in cold turkey and no real study.
Well, I did. So I did probably 6 or 7 hours worth of reading, of the recommended reading. So I just downloaded all of the PDFs, had them on my iPad. I was reading them on the train to and from work for a few weeks leading up to it, and then the Friday and then over the weekend before the Monday that I sat the exam, I spent a few hours each day getting through the reading list. So I got through all of the recommended reading. I didn't read the Corporations Act. I read the table of contents, but I didn't read the 600 odd pages of the 2 extracts of the Corporations Act.
You can also subscribe on the FASEA website to get notifications of releases of information and so forth, which is pretty handy. Because otherwise, you can be in the dark pretty quickly.
Yeah, if you don't go looking for it.
I'll give you affiliates if you want. No, they should cover. They'd be inundated. You can imagine.
They will be.
Yeah.
So if you take anything from today, look at that stuff that they've provided already. the guide to preparing for the exam with all the recommended reading, and just start looking at that, even if you're not contemplating sitting the exam in the very next sitting. But following from that, I'd also encourage you to sit the exam as soon as possible, just in case you've got to do a resit.
Before the end of this year.
Yeah, you look, if I hadn't sat it already, I'd be
Okay.
doing it in the next one of the next two.
So there's only 2 sittings.
There's only 2 sittings for this year, and they haven't provided times for the next. So I wouldn't want to be spending the kind of Christmas, New Year period
thinking
studying
about
to
it.
try and do an exam in January or February, whenever that first one is. So I'd rather just get it over and done with
Okay.
now. And if you pass, fantastic. You don't have to worry about it. Yeah.
With the written answers, because they're more subjective, who are the assessors? Are they from the
Industry.
There's industry, yeah.
Okay.
There's some lecturers and some people with 20, 30 years industry experience. There's a panel of them.
I see. Do you think the way they read the answers is to gauge the your own approach and your ideas as the
Yeah.
of the exam?
Each assessor is briefed about the way that questions should be handled, and even when they're given a bunch of papers, they actually moderate together afterward, so that nobody's, you might have a soft marker versus a really harsh one. They try to bring that all into a level playing field. So no one person kind of gets to just put their own mandate on it.
And that's why it takes around 6 weeks to get
Yeah.
the results back, because they
And
need to do
that's
that
why it's
moderation.
expensive to sit for it,
Yeah.
because these people get paid.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's not just a matter of here, mark those 10 papers, bang, there's your fee. There's a lot more to it than that.
Mm.
There's the preparatory work, and then there's the post-marking briefing. The reason I know this is I will be one of them, but I'm not allowed to do it until I've actually sat the exam first.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not allowed to mark papers if I haven't done the exam. I intend to do the exam, so I have to do the exam before I can mark papers.
That's
You're
fair.
supposed to be a few
That's
sharp.
pretty fair.
So,
Yeah.
and just to give you an idea, I've got 32 years experience in the industry, and I've got all the quals that you could want, so I don't have a PhD, that's it.
Yeah.
So I resent having to do this after all the money I've spent, but we all have to do it.
That's got to do it. It's just a matter of doing it.
Can't fight the time. We can, choose to step out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have choices.
Yeah.
So, just want to thank you again, James, for having such a
So,
detailed illustration.
coming along.